Well, joining me now to discuss Mitt Romney's speech, which has wrapped up the Republican National Convention in Florida, is John Barron, the co-host of Planet America. John, Mitt Romney was under a lot of pressure to deliver in this speech. Did he do it?
In many ways he did. It wasn't necessarily what a lot of people were expecting, was Mitt Romney to really rise to the occasion. He did, but in a very subtle, laid-back sort of a way, which could be quite strategic. He didn't try to out Barack Obama. He knows that he is more rock solid than rock star, and he was playing to that strength, essentially saying to the people that voted for Obama 4 years ago that are maybe a little bit disappointed, thought that maybe the high water mark of his presidency was the day he was elected, that it's okay to say, well, we liked the idea of Barack Obama, he hasn't really worked out. Romney spent a lot of time trying to empathise with ordinary American voters and to sort of say that we share your disappointment that the country isn't better. I can see that it can be better than this. We all agree on these points. It was very low-key. It built to a bigger crescendo, as all good speeches tend to do, but it was a very interesting approach from Romney today.
He also made the point that he thought that President Obama was probably a nice guy, but once again, as you say, he hit those points. He talked about people earning $9 an hour. He talked about people putting $50 of petrol in their car fuel tank and it's still ticking up. He tried to give as many references as possible to some of those grassroots economic issues that might be troubling Americans.
Very much a kitchen sink sort of a speech, and at times, like a number of the other Republicans over the course of the last 3 days, he was trying to hit that tone of optimism that Ronald Reagan so famously achieved in 1980. He was asking essentially the same question that Reagan asked after 4 years of Jimmy Carter: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? That was the subtext, even though it wasn't overtly stated by Romney today. Looking at all of those indicators and the fact that, you know, he's saying that, well, small business people thought that this was going to be a good time for them. People approaching retirement age were thinking that, you know, things should just get a little bit easier, completely overlooking the fact, of course, that 4 years ago when Barack Obama came to office, the American economy had already fallen off a cliff and was plummeting towards the ground. Barack Obama managed to pull it out of a nosedive, but really only just, and it's still to regain much altitude.
He also mentioned, ever so briefly, his religious faith, the fact that he's a Mormon.
Yeah, didn't use the word Mormon very much at all. Talked a lot about his church and his community built around his church. So really trying to, I guess, without going into the details of explaining what it is to be a Mormon, which is something that John F. Kennedy had to do about his Catholic faith back in 1960, Romney is, in a way, just sort of saying, really, it's just the same as any other church-going faith. We don't need to go into details here.
Now, there was a warm-up act before Mitt Romney, and it was a pretty unusual one, and that was the Hollywood star, Clint Eastwood, and he was talking to an imaginary President Barack Obama on an empty chair. Let's listen to a little bit of Clint Eastwood first.
There's 23 million unemployed people in this country. And now that is something to cry for, because that is a disgrace, a national disgrace, and we haven't done enough, obviously. This administration hasn't done enough to cure that. And whatever interest they have is not strong enough. And I think possibly now it may be time for somebody else to come along and solve the problem. We don't have to be, what I'm saying is we don't have to be mental masochists and vote for somebody that we don't even really want in office. Just because they seem to be nice guys, or maybe not so nice guys if you look at some of the recent ads going out there, I don't know. But okay, you ought to make my day, huh? All right, I'll start it, you finish it. Go ahead.
Well, John, it's an oldie but a goodie, the Make My Day. Do you think this was possibly one of the more bizarre, unusual speeches that you've seen at a convention, and did it work?
Well, yes, and I would say no in that order. You were quite kind in what you chose there. It was the more coherent parts where Clint was talking about the unemployment rate and the fact that they're looking at a way of nicely not voting for Obama again, and that's all valid. And then, you know, his famous tagline from the Dirty Harry movies, that was fine. But it was the sequence where not only was he talking to the empty chair with the imaginary Barack Obama in it, but that the empty chair was talking back to him. That's where it got a little bit like, Ernie Borgnine and a big rabbit. It was very, very weird and a little bit uncomfortable to watch.
But the crowd was lapping it up. Didn't he get more cheers than Mitt Romney?
Yeah, well, yes.
I mean, it seemed to.
It's look, when you're in a convention with 50,000 semi-inebriated partygoers, I guess anything is pretty exciting. The Romney campaign was, I think, a little bit concerned about how it was going over. Afterwards, they were saying, "Oh well, it was all improv. It wasn't scripted, and you take your chances, etc." So there was a bit of cleaning up going on there. They know that most people were just sort of scratching their heads at all of this, and that it probably wasn't Clint Eastwood at his very best. And they were quipping online to the effect that this is a classic Republican, an old white guy arguing with an imaginary version of Barack Obama. It sort of summed it up.
So we're at the end of the Republican convention. The Democratic convention is due to kick off next week. This presidential race, though, is still neck and neck. Usually a party will get a bit of a bump out of a convention, and I think there is at least one opinion poll showing that Mitt Romney has snuck slightly ahead of Barack Obama at this stage.
Yeah, and that's interesting. On the average of polls, he's still about 1% behind, but he was more like 4% behind just 2 weeks ago when Paul Ryan was announced as his running mate. So there's already been a bit of a bounce. We'll just have to wait and see over the next few days if there is a further bounce. There is an average of about 5% going out of a convention for Republicans and about 4.6% for Democrats. So on the basis of that, with the Democrats next week, they get a bounce as well. We're probably still going to be in this pretty close race. But the big unknown is when Barack Obama, who of course made his name as a national candidate when he made a convention speech in 2004, he absolutely knocked it out of the park in Denver 4 years ago when he took the Democrat nomination. What is he going to do in Charlotte next week? And is this contrast that has been set up with Mitt Romney now playing rock solid to rock star? If we see a rock star next week that reminds people of why we love this guy in the first place, it could be all over. But there's also a danger that the idea has been planted in enough minds that Barack Obama, he makes a good speech, but he hasn't made a good president. That could be fatal for him as well. So this is really anyone's race.
Well, we'll be watching. John Barron, thank you very much.